Hey chums, OD here, and today we're going to talk about Homestuck's most powerful hyperflexible system. The hero titles are a hyperflexible mythology system based on the iconic Hero of Time structure used to describe Link in Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Consisting of 2 Master and 12 Standard classes that combine with a system of 12 aspects, a player's classpect tells you about their personality, innate tendencies, and broad power sets. The core rule of paradox space is that the characters are, on some level, always creating their own reality. As such, the power of their hero titles comes from their own personalities and thoughts. That means that even if 2 people had the same combination of the 168 classpects, the way that each individual character interprets their role, and so imagines the power it gives them, would differ between the 2. So 2 Thieves of Heart would likely execute their roles in completely different ways, depending on how they interpreted both the role of a thief and the nature of heart. Of course, the system wouldn't work if there was only one interpretation for what a thief could do, or what heart is. So while Legend of Zelda provides the system's structure, Hussie draws on 3 distinct concepts to flesh out its depth. Carl Jung's mythic archetypes and the existential philosophy of yin-yang for the classes, and Gnostic myths aeons for the aspects. Let's cover the aspects first. As you might remember from the Crooksite Artifact episode, the Gnostic creation myth has Abraxas generate a series of idea gods known as aeons, who come in bonded pairs meant to create all of reality. Homestuck's 12 aspects work much the same way. They represent a reductive system that breaks reality down into its basest components, much like the traditional 4 elements from Greek philosophy. But where the elements try to break down what physical reality is made of, the aspects try to break down what the realities in our minds are made of. And since the aspects are also the primordial particles of paradox space, Homestuck argues there's no difference between the 2. Based on this, my cool pal Text Talks argues that since Homestuck's reality includes the fact that it's a story, each of the aspects is also linked to an element in the construction of a narrative. Taking this into account, here's a short description of each aspect. Space and time are the aspects concerned with physical dimensions. Together they make up all of space-time. Space is also linked to visual art, environments, and the setting. Time is linked to music, narrative pacing, and decay. Light and void are linked to Gnosticism's world of light and world of darkness, respectively. Light is found in imagination and true information, good fortune, and what's important and plot relevant. Void deals in the physical world, nothingness or meaninglessness, secrets, lies, misfortune, the unknowable, and plot irrelevance. Life and doom relate to the power we wield over reality and that which reality wields over us. Doom describes the conflict of the story, the burden that the world places on every character. It's connected to rules, technology, sacrifice, and high output that comes with an unsustainable energy cost. Life, meanwhile, describes agency, the power with which a character overcomes the obstacles before them. It's linked to growth, drive, rule-breaking, and the consumption and use of energy to survive. As such, life players tend to be very wealthy and have a great amount of influence over their societies, while Doom players tend to be linked to labor and poverty. Breath and Blood are both concerned with people, goals, teamwork, and direction. Breath is linked to motion, freedom, goals set by oneself, and detachment from the world. It describes the plot, the core events that drive the story. Blood represents connection, responsibility, commitment to a collective, and attachment to the world. It describes character dynamics, the relationships that influence the cast as the story moves along. Hope and Rage are concerned with perspective. Hope relates to faith, possibilities, positive emotions, and all things imaginary and idealistic. It also describes our faith in the narrative's coherence, our excitement for building plot threads, and ability to immerse ourselves in the fictional world. Rage relates to negative emotions and the ways they have us focus on the physical reality right in front of us. It describes the contrivance present in every story, making us see through the illusion of the fiction to focus on its flaws instead. Finally, Heart and Mind relate to the nature of the self and the 2 sides of a character, their feelings and choices. Heart reflects the soul, inner feelings, love and attraction, and platonic ideals of both people and objects. Heart players often have weapons that are unique, personal, and change very little. Mind reflects the thoughts between the hero's inner world and reality. Its focus is on choices, how we present ourselves to the world around us, and the experiences that make us unique. The Seer of Mind's weapon is highly adaptable, taking a variety of forms depending on her needs. None of these descriptions are exhaustive. Each aspect represents a domain of influence that the hero rules over and uses as a source of power. How they use that power depends on who they are, which brings us to the classes and to our old pal Carl Jung. Besides Gnosticism, the father of analytical psychology was also interested in philosophy, culture, and the way that the self crafts an identity in the vast context of the world. Jung established several concepts you might recognize from pop culture, like the persona and the shadow. He also recontextualized the Gnostic world of ideas as the collective unconscious, an element of the subconscious mind that connects all people. From this collective unconscious, he believed patterns of potential he called archetypes would emerge in the minds of cultures and individuals, universally and eternally, again and again. These archetypes would then be contextualized by culture, adding specific symbols that render the pattern into more specific examples of its source. This includes patterns of behavior people might engage in, with mythic figures acting as the ultimate ancestral role models. In this sense, archetypes are a little like Platonic ideas for kinds of people, and indeed, Jung considered Plato an influence. In 1991, Dr. Carol S. Pearson adapted Jung's archetypes into a system similar to the MBTI, with 12 such archetypes describing different kinds of mythic heroes. It seems likely Andrew was influenced by these as he developed the 12 classes, but it doesn't exactly seem like he simply copy-pasted the archetypes from Pearson's model into his system. Instead, he remixed them, condensing the 14 classes into 7 pairs, each linked to a verb that describes how they interact with their aspect, and an archetype that lets us know what classes are paired while fleshing out their abilities. The pairings are divided into active and passive versions of the archetype, reflecting the Taoist concept of yin-yang. So while paired classes will use the same verb, they have some key differences. Active or yang players tend towards exploiting or using their aspect to benefit themselves, while passive or yin players tend to allow or invite their aspect to act through them to benefit others. Yang and yin also carry over to more general personality traits. Active players tend to be more proactive and self-driven, while passive players tend to be more reactive and group-driven. However, tend is the operative word. Central to yin-yang is the idea that all things change between yang and yin depending on the context, and as complex and nuanced people, a player might flip any element of the dichotomy in the right situation. So we can sometimes see active players acting to benefit others, or passive players making direct use of their aspect. Class alignment does suggest which state of being the hero is happiest and most comfortable with, as well as what kind of behavior might come naturally to them. This tendency to shift between active and passive states is the final thing that sets classes apart. The classes exist on an active-passive spectrum, with the master classes, Lord and Muse, as the most active and most passive respectively. The rest of the classes have matching verbs, creating quartets of classes with their own existential contrasts. The more intense the verb's effect on reality is, the more active or passive the classes in the quartet will be. So Maid and Prince are some of the most active classes, while Sylph and Bard are some of the most passive. We can see this reflected in the way the heroes of these classes shape Homestuck's narrative. Players of all 4 classes tend to stick to either active or passive states for very long spans of time. They tend to be somewhat inflexible, either abstaining from action entirely or taking very dramatic action all at once, with very little middle ground. They also find it incredibly stressful to adopt their opposing alignment. As a result, they tend to either keep out of the spotlight entirely as they quietly allow the story to continue, or dominate the plot completely with the sheer impact of their actions. This stark divide is lessened for the Serve and Steal classes, whose verbs conflict but can somewhat coexist, and it's almost non-existent for the Change and Know classes, whose verbs are practically interdependent. What these classes lose in direct impact, they gain in flexibility instead. That describes the base of the hero title system, but believe it or not, there's more. Jung believed archetypes manifested in the instinctual behavior of individuals, but they could also be actualized when they enter consciousness as images. Homestuck uses both approaches simultaneously, presenting the latter through an additional game mechanic we'll call live-action role-play. While each character has an innate class that describes the behavior through which they're most effective, they're also exposed to archetypes through the ancestral figures they look up to, or simply through their individual interests. If the interest in the archetype is intense enough, they will sometimes imitate the behavior and verb of the corresponding class through roleplay. Sometimes, a controlling force will even make a character adopt a particular role, limiting their self-expression and personal desires. On top of that, while each player has an innate aspect, we're told that a player resistant enough to their true calling or corrupted by outside forces could manifest their abilities as a different aspect entirely too. This creates an additional layer stacked on top of the structure the hero titles already give us. This remarkable degree of complexity, drawing upon established fields of existential and humanist philosophy, is what draws fans to the hero title system and makes it an appealing way to understand Homestuck's characters, characters from other stories, and in many cases, even ourselves. Phew! That just about explains how a player's hero title will describe their behavior. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. You don't need to follow everything right now, since I'll explain each class, aspect, and archetype more thoroughly in videos focused on particular characters as we move along. Having the system laid out like this even means I could start doing fun videos on random characters in other works of fiction, potentially even as requests through Patreon reward tiers. Let me know if that sounds interesting to you. I'll definitely do it if the demand is there. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to see more of it, feel free to support me on Patreon. Doing so seriously helps me out and gets you access to cool perks, including access to the Discord server where the concepts for these videos are threaded together from the hairs of 10,000 gay wizard beards. You can also find me on the r/Hypeswap Reddit and Discord. See you again soon, everyone. Keep rising.